and not too far away from Labour weekend, must say, just quietly, very excited about Labour weekend, particularly as I've got the strategic Friday off before the long weekend. Going to be, heading out of town, heading to Christchurch. I'm hoping that the weather in Christchurch is going to be okay, although there's this tradition, isn't there, about long weekends, that the weather seems to conspire against us. Now, I'm going to be talking with Phil Duncan from weatherwatch.co.nz. Hopefully, he's going to be joining us on the program very shortly. We've had a little bit of a glitch with the technology, but it seems to be working now. Phil, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora, hello. Sorry about that. It was my fault, probably.
No, well, I'm sure somewhere in between the technology, we figured it out together. I was just saying that how does the weather know? How does the weather know that it's a long weekend and we've made plans? It seems to be, look, it's a reasonable weather before a long weekend. By the time we get to late Monday, it's starting to clear up again. But honestly, the weather this weekend not looking particularly flash, Phil.
No, it's remarkable, isn't it? It does it at Easter time as well. Both Easter and Labour weekend often have 3 days of, you've got the 3 days obviously off work,
Yeah.
but you've often got 1.5 days of that, half of the time where it's stormy and unsettled and raining, and then the other half's not that bad. And that's again happening this weekend. Even with the severe weather all across the South Island, you've still got one half of the weekend that's not that bad, and the other half is a bit rubbish. So I always try and be glass half full and go, well, it's an excuse to sleep in.
Yes.
It's an excuse to not have to do things like mow lawns and do anything that's a chore.
Yeah.
You can just stay inside.
And hey, from my point of view, good excuse to stay inside, listen to the radio over the weekend. Yeah, a bit of vested interest in that regard. I mean, it's even trickier for Easter, isn't it? Because we keep moving the date around, and yet the weather still seems to know. We won't probably answer that question. But when it comes to what the weather is doing this Labour weekend, I hear particularly if you're in the west or the south, seriously, don't worry about the umbrella. It's just stay inside, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of severe weather developing around the South Island. So not too bad today, but they've got this heavy west coast rain. By the time we go into Saturday, there's a new low forming quite quickly, a large one over the Tasman Sea. By Sunday, it'll be sitting still over the top of the country. But Friday night, Saturday, that heavy rain that was falling on the west coast of the South Island starts to form along the eastern side, comes into Canterbury, comes into Nelson and Marlborough, and maybe the lower part of the North Island. And then you've got strong to severe gale winds from the northeast around the South Island. And on top of all of that, a cold change. Southland today, parts of Southland in the low 20s. By Saturday, you'll be lucky to get to double digits. The maximum may be only 8 degrees in some parts. So there's a lot going on. And the North Island's kind of a little bit detached from most of that severe weather, but there's still some severe weather. And if you're in a tent this weekend, you'll be noticing those winds and the rain. Even if it's just a downpour, you'll notice it.
Maybe if you are in a tent this weekend, it's time to rethink your life options. Really, honestly, what are you doing? Now, looking at the weather maps at weatherwatch.co.nz, I noticed that a lot of it is in the south and west, and straight up, they're kind of used to it. They're built for it. The west coast of the South Island, particularly the southern part of it, it's kind of designed for a downpour. Although, hey, if it starts to hit the mountains, if we're getting heavy rain on the Canterbury Plains, that's where like heavy rain can turn into problems and totally wreck your weekend, right?
That's right. And especially because Kiwis like to get out and do things at the weekends. And so people like to go out on their bikes. They like to go for a tramp, and we're a bit tough. We don't mind a bit of rain or a bit of wind, but it's all right. It's just another day. We live on the shaky isles. What do you expect? But in saying that, just be aware of rising streams, all that usual stuff that we have to say, because the rain, as you pointed out, could be very heavy up in the mountains, and you're lower down in an area where it's not too severe, and those rivers come up overnight while you're sleeping and things like that. Or if you're tramping, the way you come back the next day may not be able to do that. So just be aware of that. Keep up to date with those warnings and watches from Met Service, and you should be okay. But there's a bit of severe weather around, and certainly by the end of the weekend, as it starts to ease, we will all notice the temperature drop. It will be cooler by the time we get off next week.
There we go. Now, a bit of vested interest. I'm doing the strategic Friday off Christchurch for the long weekend. is, I mean, you mentioned west coast of the South Island, bit into the Canterbury Plains. Punting on the Avon, that might be off for me by the sounds of things. Phil, what's Christchurch looking like over the weekend?
Yeah, potentially, at least on Saturday anyway, because
Okay.
Saturday's the day where it's raining in Christchurch and it's raining across Canterbury. It's still a developing situation. This forecast might still change around a wee bit. But by the time we get to Sunday, this map I've got on the screen here with me, southerlies are moving into the south, but it's still westerlies over the rest of the country. So if
Okay.
you're in Canterbury with a westerly, not a bad day on the way usually. So it should dry out by the time we go through to Sunday. And Monday, we might still see a few showers around because there's a south to southwesterly change moving up the country and reminding us that we're still in spring. Spring's all about teasing us that summer's coming, but it's not here yet. So
Yeah.
you get that reminder every now and then that it's not summer yet.
Yeah, and hey, it has been reasonably warm recently. A bit of a downpour. That's going to be good for farmers, going to be good for people on tank water, good for the dams, right?
Canterbury needs the rain. So this is actually good. There's been a lot of people asking for rain in Canterbury for the last wee while, last few months. Unfortunately, the place that needs it the most is Hawke's Bay,
Okay.
and they are not going to be getting much rain this weekend. Hawke's Bay is probably the place to be this weekend. If you want to have the hot weather, the dry weather, and the sunniest weather, that's the region to be in, I would say.
Now, as you mentioned, we are working our way through spring, nearly into the final month of spring. How's November kicking off, Phil?
So November is usually a bit of a benign month, just based on history. It's usually when the westerlies are still around, but not as strong as they've been. You've still got some lows around, probably coming out of the Tasman Sea into the subtropics, because La Nina, even though it's not officially here yet, it's trying to form.
Yeah.
That makes more low pressure zones to our north. So to answer your question for November, I don't see anything too dramatic on the way. I still see some more low pressure coming out of the Tasman, bit of rain, but still some larger areas of high pressure. So it's not all doom and gloom for those who want more summer-like weather. For those that need rain, I do think we're going to be seeing fewer rainfall opportunities, but still rain in the mix. So it is not going dry, hot summer just yet.
Yeah, and hey, let's keep it in mind, because by the time you get to November, you start planning your Christmas holidays, but we're not quite in summer yet. It's still officially spring. And of course, for the long weekend, stay up to date at weatherwatch.co.nz. In fact, why not get the app as a way of being able to stay in touch with what the weather is doing, not only at your place, but the place you may be spending the weekend on holiday. Do check it out, weatherwatch.co.nz. Phil, thanks for what you do. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great long weekend.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.